Black Widow is directed by Kate Shortland and stars Scarlett Johansson, Florence Pugh, David Harbour, and among others. And this is the newest entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and is actually set in after the events of Captain America: Civil War, where Natasha Romanoff is still on the run after the events that sparked in that film, and she's having to basically go run into a conspiracy that goes along with her past that she's going after, and it also answers some questions that have to do with the, if I pronounce it right, Budapest that was mentioned in the other films. And now here's some little backstory. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I've been talking about pretty much a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films that have been coming out for a while, and this is basically the first film since the last one that came out in Spider-Man Homecoming, or Spider-Man Far From Home, that is the first Marvel Cinematic Universe movie that we've had in 2 years. And this is a film that actually was long in development, and I've enjoyed the Marvel Cinematic Universe for many years, and while there are movies that aren't as good as, like, say, the others, they've all brought something good to each movie, and I've never really disliked a Marvel, any of them whatsoever. Even the lesser ones I'm not really too big on, like Iron Man 2 or like Captain Marvel and all that. It's like, they're still, I found, good movies. They're like likable films. They're just not up to par of like some of the good or really great ones in that matter. But the rest of the movies, like, I still always get interested in seeing this franchise, and while it has been, you know, kind of like on a hiatus since Endgame came out, to where it felt like, where else can the story be going into this universe? Black Widow was always something that I kind of always wondered if they would ever actually do an actual movie out of, because I remember ever since Iron Man 2 came out that they actually, I think they were in the early stages of trying to do a spin-off originally with Black Widow, but I guess for a long period they just never really wanted to take the risk for it, because I think, if I'm speculating, I think what happened was they were seeing how, like, other, like, female-led superhero films that were successful, like Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel, to see how they did for a while before they finally decided to go into Black Widow. And honestly, I think that this probably may be a little too late from the timing of it, because I really kind of wish they would have had it gone, like, after the events of Civil War when it first came out. Because you know how there are a lot of movies where you get basically the build-up that leads to the next movie and all that. This one feels like the most out of place, because knowing, well, I'm not gonna spoil anything for those of you who haven't seen the other Avengers films, but knowing where, like, how the series goes after this movie takes place, you kind of makes you wonder, like, why did they wait so long to make this movie come out and basically have, you know, other than having to fill in the gaps. So that is one of the things going into it I was kind of skeptical with at first, but I still got really interested because I always did want to check out what Black Widow would do in her own film and everything. And what got me interested as well was also seeing like more of the more about her past and everything that we always were briefly touched upon in the other films, especially going back as far as, like, I think even the first Avengers film, or even when Iron Man 2 came out, if I remember correctly. It's been a while, but with that being said, though, I remember when this movie was supposed to come out last year, and they delayed it for a while because of the pandemic and everything, and, you know, so the timing felt a little like its release, but going into it, I was still hopeful for it, but I did kind of go with more expectations, knowing the hype kind of died down since the movie kept getting delayed so many times. And upon finally seeing the film, I can honestly say that I liked Black Widow, but it does have its flaws, and it's not it's not up to par with some of the other great ones that are up there. But it is still a likable film for me, and it's enjoyable in its own right. To get my pros out of the way, Scarlett Johansson, she's always great as usual as Natasha Romanoff. It's great to see her in this once again. She brings it to the edge with not only in the action department where she kicks ass, but also, we get to see a lot more of the dynamic of where she comes from in her past and everything. And I really, really liked a lot of the somber moments when it deals with her and her relationship that goes on with Yelena, who's played by Florence Pugh, which I'll get into in a minute. But like, their chemistry is just so fantastic together and humorous, and when they also get into the scenes that involve with the rest of the family of hers, including David Harbour and Rachel Weisz. The family dynamic was really strong in this and really kept the film going for me as far as investing on that regard. And I thought the rest of the cast was great too, especially Florence Pugh. I thought she stole every scene that she was in, and I've enjoyed her ever since she had her big start in 2019 with movies like Fighting for My Family and even Midsommar. Like I've really am glad to see she's really becoming a great actress and in her own right, and I can't wait to see what she does in the future with with these kind of roles that she's doing. And she was also pretty badass too, and she was on the same level as Natasha was in this, and they have that dynamic that really fits well. And while you could argue there are some scenes that they spent more time with her character over Black Widow herself, but I kind of like agree to disagree because I feel like they both had evenly screen time, and maybe one had more than the other, but I mean I thought they were both even. David Harbour was a great addition to this franchise too, and to me this was the better way of him playing a superhero character that I actually liked, and I find him more likable because in this one he plays what's called basically the Red Guardian, which is like it's basically the equivalent of the Russian version of Captain America with the super serum and everything. And while there is some things that they could have developed more as far as writing with his character, I still thought he brought a lot of great humorous stuff to the role, and they gave him a lot more stuff to work with compared to what he played with Hellboy. So this was definitely the better superhero for him to play compared to that movie, or comic book character if you want to call it that. He was great, and I got to also really get into a lot of the action scenes, the way they're crafted. And for a director like this, who I'm not really familiar with, because I heard that she's done more like independent type of vibes, she really was able to capture a lot of the action scenes very well. And there are some great set pieces that showcase a lot of the fight scenes that Black Widow goes through, and especially one that, well, let's just say it takes place on this bridge in one of the climaxes. And I thought that the way it was shot, the way the camera pans with it, was very well done and crafted. So that was great. And one of the things I got into as far as the story was we do get to dive more into Natasha's past this time, and there is some interesting stuff that they give closure with that I found remorseful, and it was a great send-off to the character that I thought really worked well. And the other thing I got to mention too, going back to the direction, is I liked how the film kind of made it to where at first it kind of started out like a Bourne movie, where in that you have a character that's going after her past and stuff, kind of like Jason Bourne did, or like any other type of espionage type of spy thriller that was keeping on that vibe. And while it can be generic because they do play into some cliches I'll get into later, I still like that direction that the director was able to go with and keep it on that level. And it kept me really, interested the way it played out. Now, as far as the rest of the film goes, to get into some of my cons, I will say that what kind of drags the film down for me is just that the plot itself, it's nothing really special. I felt like there could have been a lot more dealing with this kind of approach, like they dealt with. That this is a movie that the plot really could have felt, it felt more generic than what it should have been. And when you find out who the villain is and everything that they're going after and everything, it does come across as pretty, been there, done that kind of feel, and it's nothing really special that holds it compared to the other films. And the movie, in a way, it kind of feels like they were kind of going for Captain America: The Winter Soldier on that kind of vibe, how it becomes pretty much like a spy type of thriller that they were going for. But it's nowhere near on that level because it lacks a lot of investing as far as where the plot's going and everything to really get you to really invest besides the basic well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but let's just say that if there's something that involves with being brainwashed, and I'll leave it at there because I feel like that right there has become such a overused device in a lot of these films to where it feels very old and old-fashioned, and it doesn't really need to be in much movies the way it plays it out. And to get into some other cons, I will say that there is some elements that I kind of liked with the villain Taskmaster in this, but again, I haven't read the comics, and I know this outraged a lot of fans, but just on a movie perspective and just watching it on its own as just a regular film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even as this, there's things that I do kind of like that was cool with the Taskmaster at first, where when we first start to see the Taskmaster fighting Natasha and everything, it's cool. But then after that, it kind of loses its steam because this villain is very underdeveloped. And I'll leave it there because there's something they lead into that, while in context it makes sense, it does feel like the movie really lacked a lot of really giving a payoff for it. And I can see what they wanted to do with it, but at the same time, it felt very like they ran out of steam. And it was like they cut it for time and it felt rushed. So yeah, that was definitely a problem with that. It didn't really outrage me like a lot of how others, felt about anything. But I mean, it's just one of those where the movie itself can still be fun and can be entertaining, but it is a very big problem when you lack that kind of like very, like this should be the ultimate like villain to go after our main character and everything, and that's what it really hit it hard with. That, and there was also some noticeable CGI in parts and some set pieces that really felt off a little bit. Not to the extreme, but just a couple of points where I was like, that looks kind of out of place, especially when you notice it in like in the final climax in parts. Now, there is something that I am kind of curious about what they'll lead into with the next film. Not going to spoil for anything for those you haven't seen or anything, but let's just say that when we get to what comes in the MCU next, I'm interested in what they do with it. And I think that is a very interesting idea, a very interesting idea what they do with it in the future. But I'll leave it there because I'm not going to go over anything. But overall, though, I will say that Black Widow is definitely an entry that, while it could have been a lot better, it still is pretty much what you expect from this kind of vibe. And since it had some entertaining vibe and the characters are still very, the main character of Black Widow and the whole family dynamic really kept me invested, I did feel like the movie, that's what really kept me going. And with that being said, I'm going to go very extremely low compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter. For those of you who have also seen Black Widow, let me know in the comments what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.